Hi, I'm Paul Montone. I'm here with Sherie Guess and Greg Kaminski and Tara Montague, and we're talking about building community in the online classroom. Tara, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Tara Montague, and I teach writing at PCC Rock Creek.
Tara, you've got some great strategies for building community in your online classes, and one of them actually you do before the class even starts. Could you talk about that, please?
Sure, absolutely. Long before the term starts, I'm sure to update the details on this course details page. So when students are choosing a class, they can kind of get a sense of what they're signing up for if they choose my class. I also include a link to a short introductory video that I house on YouTube, since, of course, the students can't access any video within D2L until the term starts. And in this video, I just try to give them a sense of what the class is like. And I like to show a little bit of personality so they can begin to feel connected. So it's not simply informational. Have you guys seen this meme? I just love this horse drawing meme. This week one, how it starts out, beautiful, detailed drawing. And then as the term progresses, and by the time we get to the end of the term, you've got finals week and it's a stick drawing. So I wanted to show you this because I hope you could see that. It really speaks to me because it's oftentimes how I feel. Yeah. So you can see I keep it pretty informal. I'm just trying to connect with the students and give them a sense of my personality. It's a little goofy, but I think that that's okay.
Yeah, that's a hilarious image and really fun. Thank you for sharing that.
I noticed that you do something different from traditional office hours. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, let me share my screen. So the week before school starts, I send out an email letting my students know when I'm going to be having these half-hour coffee hours when they're scheduled for throughout the week so they can get them on their calendar. And then I make sure that it's easy to find the scheduled times on the welcome page, on the course page. And then it also happens that when I'm in these office hours, I will oftentimes pop up an announcement to them, encouraging the people who are online to pop into office hours and say hi to me. And this often works. A lot of the times people will actually pop in and someone's actually told me that they did it because they felt sorry for me, which for me is fantastic. I think that sense of mutuality goes a long way in helping establish a sense of community in the class. It also happens that students will pop into these office hours at the same time. And that is great because they get to meet someone else in the class real time. When that happens, I just jot down notes on who met each other. And then later, when I'm making small group discussions, setting up the groups, I will make sure to group those two people together so that there's somebody familiar to them in the group. And one other little thing I will say is that this last term I experimented, and I'm always experimenting, but I tried to have the office out, these little coffee hours on different days of the week. I found that it works better to space them, 8 a.m., 4 p.m., noon throughout the week so that it hits more people. And more people were coming when I did that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You've really personalized it that way and made it so informal. Just come in. I'm just sitting here drinking coffee and working, so come visit.
That's great, Tara. I also like the strategy of keeping sort of notes on who's participated in that so that you can then group those folks together within discussions and really help create a stronger sense of community for them in the class.
Yeah, I think the students really appreciate that, having a familiar name, being able to connect with someone.
So, Tara, you have another exercise that you call a reflective exercise, I believe, to get some input from students and see how they're doing and how that helps a sense of belonging as well. Would you like to tell us something about that one?
Sure. And this reflective exercise is another one of those strategies I use to, from the beginning, create this sense of community and collaboration. So one thing the students will submit this first week is it's under the D2L quizzes tool, but it's just a reflective exercise where, part of the point is to make sure that they understand the grading approach and the learning approach we're using, and they have the chance to express their concerns and ask questions to me personally. And then this last question here, I include, please use the space to let me know anything that might affect your performance in this class or help me understand how to support you. And when I first used this question, I was just, wanting to collect some information and just figured it would help with retention and persistence in my students. But what I found is that students will write a lot in this little area where they're very appreciative of the chance to tell me what's going on in their lives, express how their learning may or may not be affected. I think it really opens the door to them talking to me and letting me know what's going on and how to support them throughout the term, because they realize that, it's not just them versus my policies. It's, we're working together to create a learning experience that works for each student. So this has been a really successful question that I will never get rid of, I think, in my course.
That's terrific. You've made them feel much more comfortable about reaching out to you and even opening up to you. So
yeah, and I feel like even though this is about building a relationship between me and the students, these activities help establish the tone of, we're working together for this learning experience. And then it sets the stage for all the students to show up for the other students in the class and care about them and their success as well.
So Tara, I have another question. I know that you have an alternative to using discussions in D2L, and it's in the form of Google Docs. So would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do use the D2L discussion tool for some of my discussions. I think it works great for a lot of discussions, like gallery walks when, students need to comment on each person's post. But there's some situations where I feel like it's that tool in the learning management system just is lacking a little bit of the dynamic environment that I want to create. And so I had probably a third of my discussions, my students will pop outside to Google Docs and have the discussion there. And let me show you an example. So what you're seeing here is just an analytical discussion. There was a piece of visual rhetoric that my students were analyzing, working together to analyze and make observations about. Like the student, I know this is not highlighted, but this student is responding to someone who had posted ahead of them. But in addition, they use the comments, Google Docs comments, to also have conversations outside of the main line of conversations. And the discussions just end up being so rich and just so much gets accomplished. It's been pretty successful in my class. The student, Hannah, began the conversation by @ing Danielle, this other student. Being able to @someone is something that I model in my interactions with students. I will pop into these discussions and ask further questions and ask for clarification. I'll @my students, and then this is something that they pick up here, and this sends an email notification to the student that somebody is asking them a question or wanting to talk to them. So this is just an example of a way that I think Google Docs can be really productive in building community.
That's really neat. So a follow-up question, when you organize these for the students, how many students do you put in a group?
If I'm establishing the groups, 4 to 6 is kind of typically my magic number for most arrangements.
Neat. So in terms of the font, do you tell them to pick their favorite color to use for the font? Something like that?
I do. I say that they can do whatever they want with the font and the color as long as there's contrast and as long as it's legible. And that way it's easier to see their way through the document.
It makes me think that when we talk about building community, we can also be talking about building communities within the classroom too. It's not just this one monolithic thing, but smaller groups for the students to feel more connected with their peers.
That's a great point. Sometimes I have course shells with 2 classes in it, 50 students, and I do think it's very important to group them in smaller groups in order to make them feel like they have a place in the class and that social presence.
So when you use these strategies, do you feel that it leads the students closer to the goals of the course, the objectives that you've outlined with their learning? Do you feel they delve a little bit more into kind of critical thinking about the topics that they're going to be writing about?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like if I've opened the door to them communicating with me, and then if they feel connected to the community, that they're willing to dive in, they're willing to make mistakes, they're willing to, peer review, even though that's the scariest thing ever. And I feel like it decreases the distance between the student and the material. And I feel like it also lowers the pressure so that students can engage with the material and not worry so much about just them versus the class. I work hard before the class starts in the beginning to set up a nurturing environment where people understand that they need to show up for their classmates. People understand that I'm here to support them. And I also feel like my students end up feeling some kind of obligation toward me to help the class go well. And I think that all of those obligations just help them understand and drive toward the learning objectives better. And I do find that students want to be part of the community. It's not something that they're being forced into. They will eagerly jump into it as soon as they know that that's not going to be weird or out of place here, I think.
So I have a related question about the sense of belonging, because you mentioned peer review, and I imagine that some students do find that threatening in a way. And I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on how that has affected the sense of belonging. I guess my question would be, does that negatively affect the sense of community?
Oh, so peer review, I actually have a statement in my syllabus that says, I know most people are afraid of peer review, but I guarantee you'll leave this class feeling like it was the most productive, best part of the class. And they do echo this at the end. And I think for me, it's a matter of, again, setting it up as a learning community where we're all trying to build. It's scary to share your rough draft. And it's scary to correct people when you don't feel like you are in any way entitled to correct them. They're not correcting or editing. They're simply giving actual feedback. So it's the kind of feedback that people feel comfortable using. And I don't feel like it is detrimental to the sense of community. I actually think it helps build community.
You've talked a lot about student engagement and how these strategies have helped with that. How has it helped your teaching? How has it shaped or informed your experience as an online instructor?
So I feel like the more I implement these strategies, the more present I actually am. So these strategies are intended to demonstrate teacher presence, but they also help me be more present. And so I feel like building community is beneficial for me as well. And it makes my time more pleasant. I love the interaction with students, which can be missed out on with asynchronous teaching. So I've worked really hard to make it feel like we know each other, even though we're actually never meeting together as a class.
These are all great strategies. What might you recommend to others who might like to experiment with this on their own?
The way that I approached this, and I've been teaching online for 15 years now, and so it's just been so gradual. I think that just making very small changes is the way to go. I feel like making a welcome video is just one thing, but I feel like it has a big impact. I tend to just change one thing at a time, so it's not overwhelming to me. And so that would be my recommendation. And
It gives you more accurate feedback too, in terms of how things went. You make small changes or a small change instead of changing everything, and then you're not sure what helped.
I mean, I think all of us teachers, whether face-to-face or online, are just tinkerers, right? We change things all the time. And so I think, gradual is the way to go.
That's great advice. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that you've shared with us today about building community. It's really great to see these strategies at work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun. And I enjoyed talking with you all.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.